The last thing he said to me before I left was that I was useless. He was standing in my kitchen, holding the phone I paid for, scrolling through something that didn't include me. There was a bowl in the sink, still streaked with the milk from his cereal, and my grocery receipt on the counter. I had asked him, gently, to rinse the bowl. Not even wash it, just rinse it. He didn't look up when he answered. "You're being ridiculous. Jesus, you're useless." Not angry, not even annoyed, just like it was a fact, like he was saying the weather. "You're useless." I remember the sound my own breath made when it caught, like a door closing softly, far down a hallway. I didn't speak. I didn't defend myself. That part of me, the part that used to rush in to explain, to soften, to apologize for taking up space, was already gone. I wiped the counter beside him, turned off the kettle that had been warming, and walked upstairs without saying anything. My hands shook just a little, not from surprise, from recognition. It had been coming for a long time. The signs were small at first. The way he stopped saying thank you, the way he would leave his laundry in the hall and walk past it for days, knowing I would move it. The way he started calling me by my first name when his friends were around. Not Mom, not even Mom, just Helen. Like I was a woman who happened to exist in the same space, not someone who had given him everything. I let it happen. That's the part that still wakes me at night sometimes. Not his words, but my silence. I remember standing at the top of the stairs after he said it, my fingers resting on the banister. The house was so quiet, I could hear the refrigerator humming. I stood there for a long time, not moving. The floor was cold beneath my feet. I hadn't put on socks that morning. He had drunk the last of the coffee and left the mug beside the sink with a ring of brown around the rim. He always did that, left it like a signature. Like I would follow after and clean up the evidence of his existence. I had for years. It started small. A favor here, a little money there. Then the favors became expectations. The money became silence. Don't ask what it's for, just give it. Don't remind me what you did last time, just do it again, and again, and again. When he moved back in after the divorce, I told myself it was temporary. He said he needed to get back on his feet. That was 3 years ago. He never found his footing, or maybe he did, and it just wasn't on solid ground. It was on me. I never told anyone how heavy it had become. Not the woman at the grocery store who always asked how I was. Not my old friend Lorna, who'd stopped calling after the second time I canceled lunch because Daniel needed the car. I didn't tell anyone. I think in some strange way, I thought that if I didn't say it out loud, it wouldn't be real. That it might pass. That he might wake up one morning and remember I was someone who had once rocked him to sleep. I don't think he remembers. I think he's forgotten everything but what I can give him. That night, I sat in bed with the lamp off and the window cracked just enough to hear the night air. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. I pulled the blanket over my lap and stared at the shadows on the wall. I had raised 2 children in that room. I had bandaged knees, kissed foreheads, held fevers in the dark. My husband died in that house. I had buried him and held up the weight of mourning, while still remembering to feed the cat, pay the bills, pack the lunches. I was never useless. I had been exhausted, invisible, but never useless. At midnight, I got up and packed a small suitcase, just the things that mattered. My documents. A sweater I loved. A small notebook where I had once written poems. I took out the envelope I'd hidden in the drawer beneath my old scarves. It had been waiting for months. Inside was the updated will, the revised deed, everything legally final. He didn't know I'd done that I had already rewritten the ending. I left the house before dawn. The air was thick with dew and the porch creaked beneath my step. I left a note on the kitchen table. Not long, not angry, just 3 sentences. This house is no longer yours. Everything I gave you, I gave freely, but I have nothing left to offer. Do not follow me. I drove until the sun rose fully behind me, pulled into a rest stop and sat for a long while with my hands resting on the steering wheel. I thought I might cry, but I didn't. There was a stillness in me that I hadn't known in years. A strange sort of quiet. I checked into a motel on the edge of town, paid in cash, gave them a name that wasn't mine, but felt close enough. I didn't look back. He had called me useless. And that's the moment I finally remembered who I was. I used to love Tuesdays. It's funny what you remember. When the children were small, Tuesday meant library runs, little paper slips with due dates, peanut butter sandwiches packed in wax paper, the sort that stuck to your fingers. It meant silence in the aisles, the weight of my daughter's hand in one of mine, and my son's impatient tugging at the other. He always wanted the books with the most pages, the thickest ones, even before he could read them. Said he liked the way they looked. I thought that meant something. Back then, I measured my days in loads of laundry and meals prepared and scraped plates. My name was called out constantly. Mom, Mom, where's my mom? She took my mom, can you, until it wasn't. Until it fell out of use, like a word forgotten in translation. When my husband passed, I kept the house just as he'd left it. The razor on the sink, his boots by the door, everyone said I should move. That it was too big for one person. That the memories might be too loud. But it wasn't the memories that were loud. It was the silence that came after everyone left. Daniel had just turned 30 then. He was already too busy to answer calls, but not too busy to send a message when he needed something. Usually money, or help fixing a mess I didn't know about until it was nearly too late. He had a way of making trouble sound like misfortune, like something that simply happened to him, not because of him. A speeding ticket he forgot to pay. A missed rent check because his job was cutting hours. A breakup that required first month's rent elsewhere. I helped. I always helped. I used to tell myself it was what mothers did. That it wasn't weakness. That love meant keeping the ship afloat even if you were the only one bailing out the water. Then he moved back in. Said it was temporary. Said he just needed time. Said it would be good for both of us. He brought 2 duffel bags and a plastic storage bin full of tangled cords and unread books. He set up in the guest room, but left his shoes by the front door and his dishes in the sink. The first month, I told myself it was a gift. That I'd missed him. That we were reconnecting. I tried to make the dinners he liked. Chicken cutlets, crispy on the edges. Mashed potatoes with too much butter. I bought the brand of orange juice he liked and tucked folded towels at the end of his bed. He thanked me once. By the 3rd month, he was always in his room. Door closed, the flicker of his screen lighting up the hallway at night. When I'd knock to ask if he was hungry, he'd mumble something through the door. Sometimes yes. Sometimes not now. And still, I made the plate. One night, I passed his room and heard him laughing on the phone. It wasn't the laugh I remembered. It was sharper, quicker. There was something brittle in it. He said, I don't know, man. It's just easier to crash here. She's old. She doesn't care. I stood in the hallway and waited for him to say more. He didn't. I went back downstairs and stared at the dark TV screen until it reflected my face back at me. After that, something shifted. He stopped cleaning up after himself entirely. He left the vacuum in the hallway like he'd started a chore and forgot to finish. The soap dispenser ran empty in the bathroom, and I waited to see how long before he'd mention it. He didn't. He used my car and left the tank empty. Said he forgot. Said he was in a rush. I started hiding my keys. He noticed. You don't trust me now, he said one morning, not looking at me, just scrolling through his phone. I said nothing. Later I heard him in the kitchen, talking to someone again. I'm not even kidding. She's losing it. Yesterday she told me I hadn't rinsed a dish right. Like that's the issue. She doesn't get it. She's just done. Done. That word hung in my chest like a stone. There was no confrontation. That's never how I've been. I didn't throw anything, or raise my voice. I didn't even cry. I sat in the garden that evening and watched a snail cross the brick path. So slow. So certain. The next day I got up before dawn, made myself tea, sat in my armchair and looked out at the street. It was garbage day. When Daniel came downstairs that morning, late as usual, he looked annoyed that the coffee wasn't ready. He looked around and said, "What are you even doing all day?" I think that's when it happened. The switch. Something inside me sealed shut. He didn't say it like a question. He said it like a fact. Like I was background furniture, part of the walls. A woman too faded to matter. I stared at him, and I said quietly, "Nothing really. Just waiting for you to remember I'm a person." He blinked at that. Said, "Jesus, you're being dramatic." Then he laughed. That brittle laugh again, called me useless. Just under his breath. But clear enough. That was the last morning I made coffee for two. The next time I went to the store, I bought a small bag of beans instead of the big one, just enough for one person. I bought single-serve meals and started locking my bedroom door at night. I didn't say a word. I just stopped making room. Because I knew finally that he would never see me if I kept standing where he expected me to be. And if I wanted to be seen again, I'd have to move. It was a Thursday afternoon when I found the envelope. He had left it on the hallway table, as if it were nothing. As if I were no one. I wasn't looking for anything. I was dusting. The habit of it. My hands still do those motions even when my mind has gone somewhere else. He had left an old grocery bag crumpled underneath his shoes, and when I bent to toss it, the corner of a folded envelope slipped out. I shouldn't have opened it. I know that. But I did. The address on it was mine. The name wasn't. It was a letter from a bank. Something about a loan application. It had been denied. I remember standing there, rereading the words like they might change if I looked again. Then I saw the income field. My name was listed. My retirement amount. My house value. He'd listed it all, as if it belonged to him. I sat down right there on the carpet and turned the envelope over in my hands. He'd used my information to apply for something I never agreed to. Without asking. Without even telling me. There was a number at the bottom. I called. The woman on the line was kind. Too kind. She asked if I wanted to report it as fraud. I didn't know what to say. I said I'd call back. I never did. That night I looked through the kitchen drawers until I found my old file folder. The one with the deed, the will, the insurance policies. I went through it slowly, page by page. Everything still in my name. For now, I didn't sleep much. He came and went like he owned the place. Left the front door open. Took my car again. Told me he was meeting a friend to talk about a business idea. Said I wouldn't understand. I didn't answer. He didn't notice. That weekend I checked the lock on the basement door. It had rusted over. I oiled it, just to give myself something to do. The next morning I opened the laptop he never used and started searching. Quiet things. Attorneys who worked with seniors. How to add a password to your bank account. How to change the name on a deed. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't have anyone to tell. A week later, I visited a small law office on the edge of town. No sign on the window. Just a name on a door. The woman inside looked about 40, with careful eyes and a voice that didn't rush. She asked why I came in. I said I think I need to protect what's mine before someone else takes it. She nodded like she understood. We spent an hour going over everything. I told her what I could prove, what I suspected. She asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no. I just wanted to make sure it couldn't happen again. I changed my will that day. I took his name out of the house documents. I set up an account he couldn't touch. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because I realized I'd been standing still in a burning room, waiting for someone to notice the smoke. And I was done waiting. I started donating little things. Quietly. My wedding china, still boxed in tissue, went to a women's shelter resale shop. My husband's old tools to a community center. I donated the spare coats, the extra linens, the storage bins I'd kept in the attic for years thinking someone might need them someday. Someone did. Just not the person I thought. He didn't notice at first, or maybe he did, but didn't care. He was used to things appearing and disappearing, without effort. Then he asked where the power drill was. I said I gave it away. He frowned. Said, "Why would you do that?" I said, "It wasn't being used." He looked at me then like I'd spoken a different language. Like I'd suddenly become unfamiliar. That's when I knew the spell was breaking. I started keeping a notebook. One of those cheap spiral-bound ones. I wrote down everything I gave away. What day. Where it went. I wrote down the phone call to the lawyer. The bank account. The will change. I wrote it all so I wouldn't forget that I had done it, that I had chosen. One night, after he'd gone out and left the kitchen a mess again, I sat at the table and looked at the house. Noticed for the first time how tired it looked, how tired I looked in it. The next morning, I made a donation to a local charity that helped single mothers set up new homes. I gave them my living room set. They came with a truck and thanked me. One of them hugged me before she left. That afternoon, Daniel came downstairs, blinking like he'd just woken up. He stood in the empty room and said, "What the hell is this?" I didn't flinch. I said, "A gift." He laughed. That same hollow laugh. He said, "Are you losing it or something?" I looked at him. I said, "No. I think I'm finally finding it." He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. But I hadn't. I was just finally using it to leave. And I hadn't even told him. The best part yet. That the house wasn't his to inherit anymore. That I'd already made plans to give it to someone who might actually sit in its rooms and feel grateful. But I didn't say that out loud. Not yet, because sometimes silence is its own kind of power. And I was learning how to use it. I didn't leave all at once. People think it happens like that. Some final argument, a slammed door, a suitcase packed in the heat of fury. That's not how I work. That's not how the years go. They don't end in thunder. They erode. Quietly. Like water under a door frame. One day you notice the wood's gone soft. I began with small things. First I stopped restocking what he used. The cereal he liked. The almond milk. The high-end shampoo he always swiped from my bathroom. I used to add those things without thinking. I was the hand behind the curtain, keeping the stage set. I stopped being that hand. Then I started locking up my documents. I bought a fireproof box. Put it under my bed. Birth certificate, social security card, pension statements, car title. The deed, now with the updated trust designation, sat right on top. I made sure of that. I wanted to feel the weight of it every time I opened that box. Proof that I still owned something. He noticed the locks, eventually. Said I was acting paranoid. Said, "You think I'm gonna steal your birth certificate?" I just looked at him and said, "I think I don't know you anymore." He scoffed. Went back upstairs. The next week I went to the credit union and added password protection to everything. I had the accounts flagged. No changes without me present. Physically. The teller looked up at me. She was younger than my daughter would be now, if we still spoke. She asked, "Is everything okay?" I said, "I just want to be left alone in peace." She nodded. She understood something in that. I think. A certain kind of woman hears that and knows exactly what's been lost, even if she doesn't ask for details. At home, Daniel got angrier. Not all at once, just in little sighs and snide comments. His world had relied on mine going unnoticed. That was shifting. I started walking in the mornings. Just down the block and back. My knees ached, but I went anyway. I liked the cold air. I liked being somewhere he wasn't. And one morning I didn't come back. Not really. I went to a small motel 2 towns over. Cash only. They didn't ask questions. I stayed one night, then 2. Brought my folder of documents with me. Left the television off. I sat by the window with a cup of tea and wrote a list in the margins of a church bulletin I'd found in the lobby. List of what I still owned. List of what I would give away. List of what I would never allow again. I didn't tell Daniel where I was. He didn't call to ask. When I came home on the 3rd morning, the garbage hadn't been taken out. The sink was overflowing. He was on the couch, wrapped in my old blanket like it was owed to him. He barely looked up. "Where were you?" he said. I said I was deciding whether or not to come back. He stared at me like I was speaking nonsense. I walked past him and up the stairs. I didn't wait for a response. That night I started packing what mattered. Not clothes or keepsakes. Those things don't matter the way people think. I packed files, journals, my wedding ring and the few photographs I had kept. One of my daughter when she was still small enough to believe I could fix anything. One of my mother on her wedding day. One of me, much younger, in a sun hat I don't remember owning. By Friday I had a P.O. box. I had opened a new account in a new credit union, just under my name. No joint access. No emergency contact. I had called the charity, one I'd supported in little ways over the years, and said I wanted to make a larger donation. They were surprised. Grateful. I said I didn't want a plaque or recognition. I just wanted to do something kind before I left this house for good. They asked what kind of legacy I had in mind. I said, one that doesn't end with silence or anger. Just peace. The woman on the phone cried. I slept in my locked bedroom that night, knowing I had made my final choice. In the morning, I left Daniel a note on the kitchen counter. It said, I have given you enough. The rest is not yours. The house has been placed in trust for a shelter that helps women start over. I've started over too. I will not be contacting you again. Do not come looking. No name. No apology. No forwarding address. Just the truth. I put the last of the keys in a small padded envelope and mailed them to the attorney. That way, if Daniel tried to claim anything, it would already be done. I left the back door locked. The alarm set, the cabinets empty. I left no trace of myself on the shelves or in the drawers. And then I drove. I didn't cry. Not that morning. Not for that house. I had already grieved everything inside it long before I shut the door behind me. I stayed in that same motel for 2 more nights. I listened to the hum of the vending machine outside my door. I wrote in my journal. I said nothing out loud. And for the first time in years, I was not waiting for anyone to need me. Not waiting to be called. Summoned, blamed. Begged.
Did.
I had removed myself from the scene. Not in rage. Not in sorrow. In clarity. I used to believe motherhood was about permanence. About staying no matter what.
Did.
Now I know it's also about leaving when you're no longer seen as a person.
Did.
Some exits aren't about escape. They're about returning to yourself. The motel room smelled faintly of pine cleaner and something older, maybe mildew, maybe history.
Did.
The wallpaper peeled at the edges, and the bed had that slight metallic creak when I shifted.
Did.
But it was mine. Mine in the sense that no one else had keys. No one else had opinions about where I left my shoes or how loud the television played. I kept the blinds half closed.
Did.
The sun still found me anyway.
Did.
There was a gas station across the street with lukewarm coffee and breakfast sandwiches wrapped in foil. The man behind the counter said good morning, with the kind of voice that didn't expect a reply. I liked that. I liked being no one to anyone. I didn't tell the motel clerk how long I'd be staying. I paid in 3-day increments, in cash. I used the name Marion.
Did.
It's not my name. Not really, but it was close enough to feel honest. I started keeping a new notebook. One without the past in it. I wrote down the names of places that offered part-time work to seniors. Thrift shops. Library back rooms. A bakery in a strip mall that said help wanted but never called me back. That was fine. I wasn't in a rush. I cleaned out my purse.
Did.
Took out the extra keys. The little pharmacy discount cards. The photos in cracked plastic. I left them in a drawer in the motel desk. Not out of spite. Just out of relief. For the first time in my life, I didn't owe anyone my presence. There was no dinner to prepare. No medicine to refill for someone else. No birthdays to remember. I bought a small container of raspberries and a soft roll and ate it slowly by the window, watching the cars pass. Sometimes I thought about Daniel. Not out of longing, out of disbelief. I replayed that moment. Him standing in the doorway, calling me useless. The exact tone. The way he looked away from me, like I was something that had run its course. A half-empty jar in the fridge. It took years to get there. To be looked at like that. And I had let it happen.
Yes.
With every dinner I cooked. Every bill I paid. Every time I folded his socks and told myself he just needed more time to grow up. I realized, sitting there in that sticky chair by the motel desk, that I had never once told him what I needed. I had spent decades cushioning him from consequences, building little bridges over the messes he made. And he had walked over me every time. He didn't know I was gone yet. Not truly. I imagined him waking up, opening the fridge, finding it empty.
I imagined the slow realization settling into his chest, that there was no one left to clean up behind him. I had mailed the paperwork to the shelter the day before.
Id.
The deed transfer was complete. A lawyer's office would notify him if he ever checked the mailbox. There would be no fight.
Id.
No scene, just facts in black ink. The house he thought he'd inherit was now named for someone else. Someone who needed it. Someone who would find warmth in those walls again. I didn't need warmth from it anymore.
Id.
I had survived what it had become.
That morning, I took a bus into the city, walked past shop windows and noisy cafes and bookstores too crowded to feel lonely in. I stepped into one and bought myself a new pen. Not expensive, just smooth in the hand. The cashier asked if I wanted a receipt. I said, "No, thank you. I want to forget I paid for anything today." She laughed. I smiled. Back at the motel, I wrote 3 letters. The first was to a neighbor. The kind one, Marlene, the one who always brought back my trash bin when I forgot. I told her thank you. I said I'd gone somewhere quieter. I didn't leave a return address. The second was to the shelter. I told them I hoped the house became a place where no one was called useless again. The third was to myself. I wrote, "You are not a container for other people's needs. You are not the leftovers. You are not the unpaid bill, the missed call, the spare room. You are the lock on your own door. You are what stays." I folded that one into the inside pocket of my bag. Later that evening, I walked to a diner 2 blocks away and sat at the counter. The waitress had tired eyes and called everyone on her. She didn't flinch when I ordered just tea and pie. I watched her refill a man's coffee without being asked. When she brought the check, she said, "You look like someone who used to hold a lot together." I looked up. I said, "I did." She nodded like she knew exactly what that meant. When I walked back to the motel, it had started to rain. Not hard, just soft enough to wash the day off. I let it fall on my face. Let it mark me clean. Inside, I turned on the radio, just static and snippets of voices, and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were still damp. I had no calls to return, no plans to keep. Just a quiet room, a single cup, my name written only by me, and I didn't miss the noise. Not one bit. The voicemails started 4 days after the letter would have reached him. I was sitting outside the laundromat with a bag of clothes and a paper cup of tea, the sun pulling long shadows down the sidewalk, when I heard the buzz of the burner phone in my pocket. I let it ring out the first time. I knew the number. The second time I listened. His voice wasn't angry, not yet. It was confused. "Hey, it's me. I think something's wrong with the house paperwork." The lawyer said, "I don't know. They said it's in a trust, for a charity." "You didn't, is that right?" He didn't say my name, didn't say mom, just his voice, circling a problem like a dog sniffing around a locked door. I deleted the message. He called again later that night. His voice had hardened. "I don't know what the hell you're doing, but this isn't okay. That house was supposed to stay in the family. You don't get to just Jesus. I've been living there. You didn't even give me a chance. No apology, no question, just the sound of someone used to being given things, realizing the lock had changed." I didn't answer. The next day he sent a text. Just, "Are you serious right now?" I turned the phone off, left it in the drawer with the motel guide and the takeout menus no one ever used. I had known there would be fallout. I had prepared for it in my mind. But the thing no one tells you is how small the panic sounds when you're finally on the other side of it. He wasn't calling out of love. He was calling because the structure had shifted. Because the ground that once held him up was no longer offering itself. I remembered suddenly, when he was 7 and left his bike out in the rain. I had warned him not to. He forgot. The chain rusted. He cried, not because he was sorry but because the bike no longer worked. That's how he was now. Crying over the broken bike, not the mistake. By the end of the week my voicemail box was full. "You didn't have to do this. You blindsided me. You're acting insane. Then silence. Then can we talk? Then I didn't mean it. Okay. I was just frustrated. Can you please just call me? He sounded tired, but not remorseful. I deleted everything. I walked to the library and filled out a volunteer form. They didn't need help that day, but they thanked me for asking. The woman behind the desk smiled as she handed me a list of upcoming shifts. She didn't ask about my past. She didn't know anything except my name, the name I had chosen to give her. Later, I passed a grocery store with a help wanted sign. I didn't go in, but I memorized the number. Wrote it on the back of a napkin when I got home. Daniel messaged again 2 days later. This time it was longer. He said he was trying to understand, that he'd been stressed, that maybe he hadn't handled things the right way, that he'd assumed too much. He used the word sorry once, but not about the name, not about the way he said it. That morning in the kitchen, not about making me invisible, just a vague blanket apology. Something he could later say he'd offered. He ended it with, "Can you at least let me stay until I figure things out?" That was what it had always been about. What I could offer. What space I could make. Not who I was. That night I lit a match and burned the napkin with the number on it. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. I didn't need a job to prove I was useful. I didn't need to explain my choices to a stranger behind a deli counter. I needed time, stillness. I took out the letter I had written to myself, the one in the inside pocket of my bag. You are not a container for other people's needs. I read it 3 times. I didn't reply to Daniel. Not that day. Not the next. On the morning of the 7th day, the motel clerk knocked gently on my door. I opened it with my cardigan still half-buttoned. She handed me a manila envelope. "Someone left this for you," said he'd driven all night. He didn't wait. I took it and thanked her. Closed the door. Inside was a printed letter. No return address. It was full of rationalizations, childhood memories, hints at regret disguised as nostalgia. I miss Sunday mornings with pancakes. I miss Dad. I miss when things weren't complicated. But it was also full of questions that weren't mine to answer. Why did you do this? Don't you think you overreacted? What am I supposed to do now? At the bottom, a final line. I don't know what you want from me. That was the most honest thing he'd written. He didn't know, because I had never taught him what I wanted. I had only given, silently, endlessly, until there was nothing left but a woman on a motel bed with an envelope in her lap and nothing she needed to say back. I folded the letter and placed it beneath the Gideon Bible in the drawer. It didn't belong to me anymore. I belonged to no one. And that finally felt like peace. I started waking before dawn. Not from worry. Not from fear. My body just knew it was time to get up. I'd stretch slowly, careful with the hip that clicks now, and sit with my feet on the floor, feeling the firmness of it. It was good to feel something solid. By 6 I'd be walking the short path to the diner down the road. A silver and glass box that smelled like burnt toast and old sugar. They opened early for truckers, nurses, widows like me. The same waitress, Carla, was always there. Her hair in a messy bun. Lipstick half worn by the end of her shift. She never asked me questions. Just nodded when I walked in, poured the coffee without asking. I started sitting at the same booth. Not out of habit, but out of something softer. Comfort. It faced the window. From there I could watch the parking lot shift with the light. Watch the horizon become gold, pink, gray. Some mornings I brought my notebook. I'd write down things I noticed. The way Carla always wrote the check before you asked. The way the cook cracked eggs with one hand. I wrote the name of a shelter in town that offered free legal workshops. Then a local center that hosted reading groups for older women. I called. They said I could come to the next session. They said it was casual, no pressure. Just bring your voice. So I went. It was a Wednesday afternoon. The room smelled like tea bags and carpet cleaner, but the women smiled when I walked in. One of them, Elena, pulled out a chair beside her and said, "You're new. That's good. We need new."
I told her my name was Marion. She said hers used to be Margaret, but she changed it after her divorce. Said she figured if men could start over, so could she. I liked that. We read a poem out loud, passed the page around, one line each. Mine shook a little. It had been years since I'd spoken for myself like that. Not in defense, not in explanation, just a voice, saying something it didn't write, but still meant. Afterward, we drank tea out of mismatched mugs. No one asked me where I was from. No one asked if I had children. No one asked if I was okay. They just let me be. That's a rare kindness, I've found. Being let alone without being made invisible. Over the next week, I went back twice more. I started recognizing faces. A woman named Beatrice, who never smiled but always brought banana bread. A woman named June, who wore her husband's dog tags under her sweater even though he'd died 10 years ago. We were all a little broken in places. That didn't make us fragile. That made us careful. I found a room to rent above a tailor's shop. The landlord was a soft-spoken man with a limp and a daughter in college. He didn't ask about my history. He just said, "It's clean, and the water runs. You'll have your own key." That was enough. I moved in with one suitcase, my notebook and the same 2 sweaters I'd been wearing on rotation. It felt strange not to carry the past with me, but lighter too. The walls were thin, but no one raised their voice. There was a small window that looked out over the alley. Some nights I'd sit by it and watch people coming and going from the back entrance of the bakery next door. There was a rhythm to their work. A calm. I liked knowing someone was making something while the world slept. One morning I walked into the bakery and asked if they needed help washing trays. The owner, a woman named Priya, with flour on her cheek and calm eyes, said, "Not right now, but maybe soon. Come back next week." I did. The next time she handed me an apron. I worked 4 hours a day, wiping counters, loading racks. My hands remembered how to move with purpose. I didn't speak much, but I listened. The dough thudding against the board. The timer beeping. No one asked what I used to be. I liked it that way. Sometimes I'd think of Daniel, only in brief flashes. A pair of his old socks left under the coffee table. The way he always used too much milk in his cereal. I never thought of him with longing, just with a strange kind of grief. The kind you feel for someone who's still alive but already gone. At the shelter I helped pack boxes now. Toiletries, cleaning supplies, diapers. The women who came in didn't ask about my story. They just handed me lists, nodded, said thank you. One of them, a girl no older than 20, looked at me one day and said, "You remind me of my grandma." But not in a sad way. I didn't know what that meant exactly. But I liked it. At night, I would make myself tea and sit in the one chair I owned. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't need to fill the silence anymore. The silence was mine now. No one was calling. No one was asking where I was, what I was doing, what I had to give. And yet I was more alive than I had been in years. I had become something else. Not a mother in waiting. Not a background figure. Not the emergency number for someone else's chaos. Just a woman with clean hands, warm bread, and her own key. And that was more than enough. It was a Tuesday, the kind of mild afternoon where the air feels undecided, halfway between warm and chill. I had just finished wiping down the bakery counters when Priya told me to take the rest of the day off. She said it like a gift, not a dismissal. I stopped at the post office on my walk home. My new mailbox number was printed on a small metal key I kept on a string around my neck. Inside were 2 circulars, 1 coupon book, and a cream envelope with no return address. I recognized the handwriting. I carried it home without opening it. Made a cup of tea, sat in my one chair by the window. The envelope waited quietly on the table beside me, like it had all the time in the world. When I finally opened it, the letter was only a few lines. It was from Daniel. He said he was sorry again, that he'd finally spoken to someone, a counselor maybe, that he didn't expect forgiveness but hoped I was safe. He said, I understand, now that you left because you had to, not because you didn't love me. Then one line more. Can I see you, just once, not to ask for anything. Just to see you. There was no manipulation in it, no guilt. Just words. I folded the letter once and tucked it into the inside flap of my notebook. I didn't answer that day. I didn't answer the next, either. I let the quiet stretch between us, like linen on a line. When I finally wrote back, it was 2 sentences. I am well. I hope you are too. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I mailed it without a return address. Just initials on the corner. Email. Weeks passed. The seasons shifted again. The evenings came quicker. The air held the scent of wood smoke and the faint ache of winter coming. One night, as I was locking the bakery's back door, I saw him. Daniel. He was standing near the alley, not close enough to frighten me, just near enough to be seen. He looked thinner, his coat was too big. His hair longer than he used to keep it. He didn't move toward me, he just said, I've been here 2 days, I didn't know if you'd want to see me. I didn't answer right away. He waited, not fidgeting. Not urgent, just still. I said, I don't live here. I just work here. He nodded, like he already knew. Then he said, I wanted to say it to your face. What I said that day, I didn't mean it. I was scared and small and stupid. You didn't deserve it. I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't a boy anymore, but I also didn't see a man I trusted. I said, words don't go back in the bottle. Daniel. Once they're said, they stay. He swallowed. I'm not asking to come back. I know that's over. I just wanted to tell you, I understand why you left. I would have left me too. That at least was honest. The silence between us held a shape, like something being born or buried. I couldn't tell which. I said, I'm not angry. I just don't belong in your life the way I used to. He nodded, looked at his shoes. I brought you something, he said. He reached into his pocket and held out a small object. It was the key to my old house. The one I'd sent to the lawyer, the one I thought I'd never see again. I thought you might want it back, he said. Even if it's just as a keepsake. I didn't reach for it. I said, that house isn't mine anymore, and I don't collect keepsakes from places that erased me. He nodded again. I could see him fighting not to flinch. I forgive you, Daniel. He looked up, his mouth trembled. But I said, that doesn't mean I come back. That doesn't mean you get to know me now. I understand, he said. For once I believed him. I looked at the key in his hand. I said, you keep it. Let it remind you of what's lost when someone gives and gives until they disappear. He closed his fingers around it like it burned. I turned toward the street. He didn't follow. He said, I hope you're happy. I said, I am, and I was. I walked back to my room above the tailor's shop, made tea, turned on the small radio someone at the shelter had given me. Later I took out the notebook. Wrote 1 sentence. He saw me. Finally, but I didn't need it anymore. Some truths arrive long after the door is shut. But they don't have to be let back in. That's the lesson, that's the freedom. To hear someone say sorry, and still choose silence. To forgive without forgetting. To live without apologizing for the space you now take. There's a tree outside my window now. A quiet thing. Not tall. Its trunk leans slightly left, like it's tired from holding up its own branches. In spring it bloomed white blossoms that looked like folded paper. Now in late fall it's mostly bare. A few yellow leaves hold on as if reluctant to leave. I know the feeling. I sit by that window most evenings. 1 chair, 1 cup of tea. The quiet doesn't ache anymore. It settles. Some nights I think of the house I left. Not out of longing. Just memory. I wonder if the shelter women who live there now have painted the walls, put new photos up. I hope someone has planted something in the garden. I never could keep anything alive out there, except those scraggly tomato vines. But maybe someone else has a better hand than I did. I don't picture Daniel in it. That's done. That chapter has no pages left to turn. He didn't come back after that night. Didn't write again, either. Maybe he understood what I meant. Maybe he didn't. But it doesn't matter now. I didn't need him to change in order to change myself. I go to the library reading group every Thursday. Elena and I now sit side by side like we've always done it. Sometimes we read poetry. Sometimes we just talk. Last week June brought a small thermos of cider, and we passed it around, warm hands over warm steel. No one talks much about the past. But we carry it, all of us. Quietly, with a kind of grace you only learn after being dropped. I've started a new journal. The old one filled with letters to no one, lists of losses, deeds and plans and names, I placed in a box and wrapped in brown paper. One afternoon, I took the bus to the edge of town and left it at the foot of a tree in the cemetery. I didn't cry, I just set it down like it was something finished. A burden folded shut. The new journal begins with one line, this time I begin with nothing owed. It's strange how few people understand the relief in that. I help out at the bakery 3 days a week now. Priya says I make the best scone glaze. I don't know if that's true, but it makes me smile every time she says it. Sometimes she hands me a small paper bag at the end of my shift. Says, take this home, you need sweet things too. She never pries. She once said, people who've had to hold up the sky don't need to be asked why their arms hurt. I think she's right. I've made a friend of sorts. A man named Leonard, who volunteers at the center, widowed, kind, talks more than I do, but never too loud. We walk together after the Tuesday meals are served. Just a few blocks, quietly, he lets me speak when I want, and keeps pace when I don't. He doesn't know about Daniel. Not the details. Just that I left something heavy behind, and now I carry something lighter. Last week he asked if I ever thought about going back. I said, back to what? He smiled, nodded, didn't ask again. You learn to appreciate people who don't push. I've started painting, nothing serious. Just watercolors. I bought a small set from the discount store, a cheap pad of paper, and sat one morning trying to remember what clouds actually look like when you don't rush past them. They're never just white. I've realized there's gray and blue, and even soft purple in there. You have to sit still to see it. That's what my life is now. Stillness, not stagnation. Just still enough to see things clearly. Some mornings I walk to the pond in the park and feed the ducks crusts of day-old bread from the bakery. One of them, a little white and brown one with a crooked foot, waddles straight to me now. I call her May. I don't know if she knows me, but it feels good to be approached without suspicion, without expectation. I have no family photos on the walls. No heirlooms, just a shelf of library books and a vase of dried lavender that still smells faintly of something kind. There's a letter I keep in a drawer, not the ones from Daniel. Those are gone. Burned in the same tin I used to store the deeds. This letter's for me. It says if someone once made you feel small, go somewhere they've never been and grow. That's what I've done. No revenge, no spectacle. Just steady, quiet growth. I think people expect grand endings, final confrontations, redemption arcs. But some of us don't need that. Some of us just need a room with one chair, a window with a tired tree, and the sound of our own voice, steady and unafraid, saying, I'm still here. I choose peace. And this time I decide who gets to call me anything else.